I just watched Rachel Reeves' speech to try and boost the economy. And, as predicted, it wasn't a speech to boost the economy at all. We all really know what it was, and it was a desperate attempt to try to cling on to her job. Why would we even need a speech in the first place if the economy is doing so well under her leadership? It sounded like more of a plea to businesses not to stop investing in the UK. Reeves and Starmer keep banging on about growth, but they haven't introduced any new policies that will promote new growth. They are just typical Labour and focusing only on taxes. Recent data shows negative or near zero growth in the UK since Rachel's budget. Of course, businesses are reluctant to invest in the UK because they're struggling, and you chose to burden them with more taxes. They have increases in the minimum wage and rise in national insurance contributions coming up to deal with. So how can they focus on growth? Reeves sounded very nervous throughout her speech, and quite rightly so. She had very little new to offer, and what she did offer was small fry investments like 65 million for an electric vehicle charging network, 63 million for an advanced fuel fund, whatever that is, and a £20 million investment in Cornish Metals. But that's to build solar panels, something we probably wouldn't have to do if it wasn't for their insane and impossible drive to net zero. Her other initiatives were hailing a third runway at Heathrow as the saviour for the UK economy, and just letting anyone build houses wherever they like, subverting all planning rules. She even threw in a joke about protected wildlife to boot. And she said the default answer to planning applications would be yes. So that sounds like total desperation and a disaster in the making.
We will introduce a new approach to planning decisions on land around stations, changing the default answer to yes.
Unbelievably, she hit back at the opposition and critics because they haven't offered her any ideas. I mean, remind me whose job it is. You're getting paid to be the Chancellor, so you need to come up with the ideas yourself. You talked a very good game in opposition, and now you're like a rabbit caught in the headlights.
I've seen no alternative put forward by the opposition parties. No alternative to deal with the challenges that we face. No alternative to restoring economic stability. And therefore, no plan for driving economic growth.
And I was quite surprised to hear her talk about Liz Truss's budget. She accused her disastrous budget of raising borrowing costs. But under Rachel Reeves' budget, borrowing costs are much, much higher and at their highest level since 2008. She forgot to add that into her speech, I see.
And never again will we see a repeat of the Liz Truss mini-budget, which sent borrowing costs and mortgage rates spiralling for families and for businesses.
And the rest of Reeves' ideas seem to be all rhetoric and hypothetical nonsense, like building UK Silicon Valley. I mean, this comes from a government that had cancelled the Conservatives' £1.3 billion investment into AI, then hired an AI expert to tell them they needed to invest more into AI. So they're clueless on the economy and they're clueless on technology as well. Reeves showed more delusion when she described net zero as the opportunity of the century. But for who? Not for us, that's for sure. Maybe for all the companies making a fortune from it. Those profits will come from us in the form of higher energy bills. And we already have the highest electricity prices in Europe.
There is no trade-off between economic growth and net zero. Quite the opposite. Net zero is the industrial opportunity of the 21st century.
And she talked again about her fantastic trip to China, which apparently brought back £600 million of benefits, none of which she's yet been able to tell us about. And of course, she mentioned a £22 billion black hole. I mean, no Labour speech is complete without that.
You've struck a very optimistic tone today. You've talked about the UK's upbeat economic prospects feels quite different to the tone you struck in your early months in power, when you were really quite gloomy about the legacy that you'd been left and the state of the economy. Prime Minister even called a press conference to tell us that we were in an economic and a social black hole. We got almost zero growth in the second half of 2024. I wonder if you regret that gloomy tone, and do you think that you and the Prime Minister talked down the economy in the back half of last year?
Well, the truth is, I did face a real challenge when I became Chancellor, with a £22 billion black hole, not for some year in the future, but in the financial year we were in. And
strangely though, she blamed the last government for mortgage and interest rates going through the roof, but the last government presided over the lowest interest rates in history for over 10 years, and interest rates only recently peaked at 5.25%, which historically isn't that high. So what is she talking about? She's talking absolute nonsense as usual. Her whole speech was simply a PR stunt to try and salvage her job. It won't work. Everybody knows you can't grow an economy by taxing the life out of it. It simply will not work. Businesses will continue to cut back on investment. Borrowing costs will continue to skyrocket, and she will be forced to bring in even further taxes that will surely send the economy well and truly into a death spiral. This is what happens when someone's clearly not qualified for the job they're paid to do. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you think.